collaboration with the Cyprus Mail, this is the Cyprus News Digest with Rosie Haralambous.
Coming up this week, elections are coming next year, and though it still has not made its plans for the Agamas Peninsula public, the government is forging ahead with new roads and infrastructure projects in protected areas.
This road is taking place because of micropolitics and irresponsible promises, and is not actually going to improve the life of people.
The ambassador of the Czech Republic outlines his country's priorities for its term as president of the European Council.
We have to think about the energy crisis. We are now in danger that there will be no supply of gas and oil, so we need to very quickly implement the programs the EU has in the area of energy, Repower EU.
And there are opportunities for Cyprus in the field of solar energy.
Cyprus is a very important case in point here because it is a country with a great solar energy potential that remains a little bit underexploited, and we hope that this initiative can also help the case of Cyprus specifically to reach the real potential it has in terms of solar energy production.
The headline in the paper at the weekend was "Historic Day, Ground Broken for New Paphos to Polis Road." Now, anybody who follows the news in Cyprus will know that that is something that's been on the cards for many years, and it kept getting put back, and then there were environmental assessments. All sorts of things have been going on, but apparently now, although it's not directly connected to the plan for the Agamas, it obviously is going to mean that in the future, when there's a highway running through the Sousa Valley, which we'll talk about in a minute because it's also a very important area for the birds in Cyprus, it's obviously going to mean it's much easier to start developing along that highway and at either end of it. Joining us to discuss the whole issue of development in the Agamas Peninsula is the Secretary of the Paphos District Green Party, Orestis Matsas. Oresti, let's start, though, if we may, with the Paphos to Polis highway. It is going through a very tender area as far as particularly certain bird species are concerned. What's your take on why it is now going ahead? Because I see this as another thin end of a wedge for further development in the whole Agamas Peninsula.
As you correctly said, the road from Paphos to Polis Chrysochous is going to have a very negative impact, especially in the Sousa Valley. This is what actually Environmental Authority found 2 or 3 years ago when this discussion was taking place. We have to remind that also the European Commission was against the construction of this road. Also, the audit office, from the economic perspective, was against this road. Not because we do not want the people of the communities of Polis Chrysochous have the development that they need, but because they actually never considering alternative choices of how to connect the city of Paphos and the highway with this area.
Am I right in thinking that back in 1998 there was a recommendation after a study that instead of constructing a whole new road, the optimal solution would be to improve and upgrade the existing Paphos to Polis road? We don't actually, do we, need an enormous highway that's going to have 5 bridges and 2 tunnels and will totally bisect that Sousa Valley landscape that is so important for 3 or 4 bird species.
Exactly. They never tried to see these alternative choices to upgrade the existing road, and it's actually funny because the road that they're to construct right now is not even what they've planned. It's actually the half distance of the road, and with 2 lines instead of 4 that they were planning. And this is what exactly shows that this road is taking place because of micropolitics and irresponsible promises, and is not actually going to improve the life of people that are doing this distance.
Well, I read, I think, a report that said the initial construction will be a 2-lane highway, but it will be followed by the road being upgraded to 4 lanes. So once again, we keep talking about salami slicing the environment, thin ends of wedges. So we're doing it bit by bit so that people accept it.
Yeah. Not sure that all of them accept this way of solution. I mean, even the people of the communities are really tired of promises all these years, and they really need to see something to happen that is going to improve their lives. And okay, they see it as a start, but many of the people really believe that it's just a piece of bread to shut their mouth and take it as something.
Well, one does wonder whether or not the 300 million might not be enough, said Averos Neophytou, who is very much in favour of this road. It's extraordinary to me that we haven't got better things, perhaps like conservation, to spend it on. Orestes, let me ask you as well about another thing that's going on in the Agamas Peninsula, the port of Lachi. And again, in the newspaper last week, it said that the expansion project is in the pipeline. Now, it's already been expanded exponentially, has it not? I remember when Lachi was just a few fishing boats, and now it's a blooming great harbour with all sorts of yachts and motor launches. It's a luxury tourism place, isn't it?
Yes, it is. Okay, it's actually really early to say anything about the environmental impact of this expansion, but we really need to check out if there is actually a need of touristic product to make this expansion. It's going to cost over 50 million euros, which is a big amount of money. So we have to consider all the parameters that are going to take into account for this expansion.
So how do you think that these 2 things that have happened in the last week or so pan into the very controversial plan for the whole of the Agamas?
Well, we have to say that all of these things are taking place in this part of Paphos, are coming because of irresponsible promises of the last decade to the people of these communities. They make them to believe that this anarchy of the development is going to improve their everyday life, but it's actually in the future is going to degrade the environment that they live in. And about the Agamas Peninsula, we have the existing urban policy that is not protecting enough the characteristic of the area of Peninsula. So that's why it's coming the local urban plan. But we have from the one side the Urban Planning Council that is doing this plan, but we have the Environmental Authority as well that has already given first negative opinion about the plan. So the council came back with a revised plan, and we are looking forward to see the answer of the Environmental Authority, which has to be the same as the previous time, negative, because the content of the revised plan is exactly the same with the first one, which include visitable farms, extension of urban zone with no need to happen, as only the 20% of the existing urban zone is in use.
I have to interrupt you there. Have you seen the Agamas Plan, the revised plan? Because the other thing that I find very fishy indeed is that they have not published it. Now, back in June, I sent a Freedom of Information request to the Interior Ministry asking for the details of the Agamas Plan, which, of course, according to the Aarhus Convention, I'm entitled to see. And I got back, and I quote you, a reply that said the Agamas Plan will be published after it will be finalised and approved, and until then it is classified as confidential. Now that is absolutely not what the Aarhus Convention says about the citizens' ability to access information about proposed environmental changes.
Exactly, you're very right. All the information that we know for Agamas Plan is from the specific ecological assessment. But the actual plan is not published, as you correctly said, against the Aarhus Convention. Yeah, there are 5, 6 really bad things in the plan, as we know from the assessment, that cannot make it affordable and acceptable from the environmental authority.
Do you know whether or not it's those things that have been objected to that are being changed in the new plan, or is this just a put it off and it'll go away sort of thing that we tend to do in Cyprus?
The decision is going to be taken from the government, actually, and we know that there is actually political pressure on the departments of the government to accept the plan as it is, and this is really bad thing to think about. I mean, it's unacceptable. So we really want to believe that environmental department, environmental authority is going to give a negative opinion.
It'll be very interesting to see if that is indeed what they do. They are, of course, all employed by the government that wants to push this through. So I'm not sure what will happen. We'll no doubt talk again if and when this government decides that it will publish the controversial Agamas Plan. I'm not sure what they mean about when it's finalised and approved, but that probably is something that we will find out shortly. Thank you very much for joining me.
Thank you.
This is the Cyprus News Digest with Rosie Haralambous.
The Czech Republic has taken over the European Council, and they have 6 months at the helm as part of the trio of France, Czechia and Sweden. Joining us to tell us what their priorities are and indeed how they have been forced to change some of them after the events unfolding in February this year is the ambassador of the Czech Republic to Nicosia, Vladimír Němec. So Vladimir, can you tell me first of all about the priorities, because each head of the European Council who takes on the presidency of the European Union tends to prioritise certain sectors, as I said, in cooperation with the people before you, that was France, and the people coming after you, Sweden.
Okay, yes, of course, the Czech Republic was in a rather complicated situation. I must appreciate what France did as the beginner of our trio, and they did very, very well, and so that's very good starting point for us. But anyway, we had to change our priorities because the current situation in global dimension, I would say, but the main of our headaches is the war in Ukraine, multiple crises we have to face. So that was why we had to change our priorities in the run. And now it looks that on the first place is Ukraine and the necessity to manage the situation and the war and think about humanitarian aid and then reconstruction of Ukraine. We have to think about the energy crisis. We are now in danger that there will be no supply of gas and oil, so we need to very quickly implement the programs the EU has in the area of energy, Repower EU, Fit for 55 and so on. But the main point is now in this area is to cut off from the supplies from the Russian Federation. In the area of defense, of course, it's about the cooperation with NATO in this very dangerous world, because the situation is worsening and the perspective is rather gloomy. So we need to be also on the defense side prepared. We have strategic compass, we will have to implement it, and we are prepared to do it. We will have to fight terrorism as well. In the area of economy, it's also very important because we are now facing looming recession, maybe stagnation in the whole Europe. So we need to work and cooperate with the countries or groups of countries who are ready to cooperate with us and conclude the free trade agreements to replace the lost market in the East. Of course, we will focus on democracy and the resilience of democratic institutions of the EU, and there attention will be paid to civil society. We will speak about the rule of law, which, as I mentioned, will be very complicated discussion in the European Union because some of member states have problems here. But I'm afraid that everybody has a bit problems here. We are not 100% clean, none of us. But some countries will need to make more progress in this area. So democracy is very important, and it's about resilience of democratic institutions.
Now, the planning that goes in to a presidency usually starts a couple of years beforehand.
Yes.
And the fact that so recently you had to change things around, what sort of headaches did that create? Because I'm assuming that although you haven't lost sight totally of your original pillars, because you've had to change them somewhat, it's meant that you've had to drop some of them or push them on the back burner and create a whole new set of pillars for the 6 months that you're in charge. How difficult was that?
Yeah, it was extremely difficult, and it was painful because our priority was as a keen supporter of enlargement of the EU and supporter of Western Balkan countries in their accession process. So we had to shift the Western Balkans on the second place because of the war in Ukraine and because of absolute necessity to send signal to Ukrainians, to support them, to encourage them by granting candidate status for Ukraine and Moldova, of course. But it does not mean that Western Balkans is not priority anymore. It continues to be one of them. It is not on the first place, sadly, but still, we think that these countries made a big job, and they deserve our attention and deserve to be confirmed their European perspective and membership one day. It is difficult now, but we will work on it, and I'm not sure if the Czech Republic is going to organize a Western Balkans summit. I really appreciate what France did in the last moments of their presidency when they tried to find agreement between Bulgaria and North Macedonia. Now it depends on North Macedonia how they are going to react, but we still think that we should start accession negotiations with North Macedonia and Albania as soon as possible. It's not in our hands now, but still we think that we should fulfill what we promised to these countries, because they really made a good job in taking over the European acquis, and it is painful. It is not easy for them, and it's difficult to say them now that you have to wait even more. So this is our vision, but I know, frankly speaking, I know that it will be difficult during our 6 months presidency to make any big progress here. But the hope must be here, and the promises should be fulfilled.
You ended your presentation to the press with some inspiring words by Václav Havel.
Yes.
Tell us a little bit about his vision for the European Union, because particularly when things are as difficult as they are at the moment, both on the economy, on the war in Ukraine, on coming out of the pandemic and so on, there can be a threat of fracturing of the unity. But that message that you gave us at the end of your presentation was talking very much about the need for unity.
Yes, exactly. I don't know if Mr. Havel spoke about the unity, because that time it was not such a topical question like now. But now unity is the key, of course it is, and maybe I should mention one thing which was not mentioned during the press conference, and it is very big danger which now threats in European Parliament. Next week there will be vote on taxonomy. Taxonomy is about the energy mixture, about the usage of nuclear energy, gas and so on. And the vote will be on the 6th of July, same day when our Prime Minister will present our priorities in the European Parliament. And if this vote fails, I'm afraid it will endanger the unity of the European Union, because, for example, Czech Republic cannot survive without nuclear energy. So if this does not pass, I'm afraid that it will limit the maneuvering room for the Czech presidency. It may cause social unrest in our country, and it would be catastrophe for the presidency, and I am afraid for the unity also. It will be very dangerous for unity of the European Union in such a small segment of problems. So taxonomy now is very important. I know that not everybody knows what I am speaking about, but it's about energy, about the energy mix, and here we need unity.
That is the ambassador of the Czech Republic in Nicosia, Vladimir Němec, talking there after the press conference launching the Czech Republic's presidency of the European Council.
Keep up to date with events in Cyprus and around the world with the Cyprus News Digest.
It's clear that energy is at the forefront of European Union concerns at the moment. And earlier this week, the EU Commission representation in Cyprus held an energy stakeholder dialogue. And one of the speakers was Ignacio Asenjo. He's from the EU Directorate General for Energy, and this is what he had to say about the new energy solar strategy.
We want to have a solar obligation for certain existing and new buildings. These are obligations that we're supposed to introduce gradually in the system, for instance, starting with new public and commercial buildings, then moving on to existing public and commercial buildings, and finally also new residential buildings between 2026 and 2029. So a whole range of buildings in the European Union, if this legislation is agreed, will have to have a solar energy on top of it. We also want to ensure that the permitting specifically for rooftop is limited to 3 months. It doesn't take more than 3 months to get a permit for that. And we want to ensure that what we call the support frameworks, so the subsidies that are given to support the installation of solar panels, is based on payback time. So payback time is how long it takes you to recover the investment that you've made there. This is a complex calculation, but a very important one. So we want to make sure that people who buy PV panels know that they can recover that money in around maximum 7 years. Today it is probably much less. And we want to ensure that there is an effective access to collective self-consumption, because there are too many obstacles for the installation of solar energy in collective buildings, collective ownership buildings. How this decision is taken, how the energy generated is shared, etc., etc. So there are a lot of barriers at the level of the member state that we need to address. Permitting is a very important part. We have identified permitting as the main barrier, so we have a whole permitting package that comes alongside the EU solar energy strategy. We, as Commission, have produced a guidance on best practices for member states. We have issued recommendations to speed up permitting, and we have issued legislative amendments, so new legislative proposals specifically on permitting. Let me just explain a little bit the concept of go-to areas. The idea is to propose to member states to identify certain areas where we can do an environmental, where they can do an environmental impact assessment, a general one that will then facilitate the environmental impact assessment to be done for each specific project, because impact assessments are one of the main bottlenecks when it comes to the permitting for renewable energy projects. And that new specific project-specific environmental impact assessment would be much simpler and faster because there is a general one for the whole area. I also mentioned skills as one of the challenges that we face, so we need to make sure that we have enough people, because we really need to accelerate, and it is already accelerating, the installation of solar energy very fast. So we need to make sure that there's enough people with the right skills to produce that. So we're going to launch an EU-level initiative on that specific challenge. Coming back to the supply side, we feel that there is not enough production of PV in the European Union, that we need to increase that. We also need to diversify our supplies, going away from just one country to several countries. So in order to promote the production of PV panels in the European Union, we are proposing to create a new solar PV industry alliance, which is something that we did in a similar way in the batteries sector a few years ago. The idea is to try to put all the actors together, from the research side to the recycling side, all along the production value chain, to ensure that they can increase their production capacity in the European Union and support their access to financing, which is proving apparently very, very difficult. And all these needs to be done on the basis of very innovative new panels, more efficient, more sustainable, more ecological than the ones that are being produced today. Finally, I mentioned in the challenges that apart from large-scale deployment and rooftop deployment, we also have what we call innovative forms of solar energy deployment. One that is very well known is agri-PV. So the fact to deploy PV panels in agricultural areas that remain in agricultural use, so that these two activities can be combined in the same zone. We also have floating PV that can be on water bodies, lakes of dams, hydro dams, or other water bodies, and also it can be offshore PV panels. But that is being researched, and I think this is an area that has a specific potential in the case of Cyprus. We also have the installation of PV panels on transport infrastructure, such as sound barriers and other elements in transport infrastructure. We have the possibility to integrate PV panels in vehicles, in the surface of vehicles that are now becoming electric vehicles, so they can generate electricity that can then be recovered and used by the car itself. And also very important, in buildings, not only can you deploy panels over the roof of the building, but you can actually make the roof itself out of PV panels, and you can also integrate solar panels in the facades and other elements of the structure of the building. These are what we call innovative forms of solar energy deployment. Some of them are meeting regulatory obstacles, and we are going to produce a guidance for member states to promote these forms of deployment by addressing these regulatory obstacles that they are meeting. Overall, this is a series of actions, as you can see, to try to ensure that the deployment of solar energy in the European Union gets to the level that is needed. Cyprus is a very important case in point here because it is a country with a great solar energy potential that remains a little bit underexploited, and we hope that this initiative can also help the case of Cyprus specifically to really reach the real potential it has in terms of solar energy production.
Well, that about wraps up this edition of the Cyprus News Digest. Many thanks for your company. Hope you'll join me next week. Till we meet again, take care and God bless. Bye-bye now.